In 1940, the British High Command, in cooperation with the leadership of the Free French Army, created and organized the extraordinary resistance network which was instrumental in the liberation of France, whose territory was enemy-occupied. The methods used by this organization that saved thousands of human lives have until now been kept secret. From 1940 until the landing of Allied forces, 3,733 parachute drops of arms and material from London were distributed by the leaders of the network to their comrades, who were responsible for the organizations of resistance in France. These organizations were open to all the French, pursuing a strictly national objective, irrespective of the political opinions they held. Moreover, 180 missions made up of French officers who would follow technical courses in England and British officers with a thorough knowledge of the French language were sent to France and specialized in attacks and sabotage. The events in this film are all true, retold with the same people who took part, and it depicts the story of two of them. It was now that the real work started, the creation of a resistance organization. The French were magnificent. They lent me everything I needed. I found it impossible to buy a new bicycle, and before I could find one on the black market, I was obliged to use borrowed bikes. I spent most of my time pedaling. My aim was 8 or 10 resistance groups in a radius of 40 kilometers around the town. I needed to do everything through personal contacts. It was extraordinary to see how the people I met, a peasant, a cafe owner and a priest, ended up producing a snowballing effect. In general, I made 3 sorts of recruits, and I arranged for the 3 categories to have as little contact as possible with one another. First of all, there were the active members of the resistance, those to whom I could confide a dangerous job like sabotage or picking up parachute drops. Then there were those in whose houses you could take refuge, in general those of a certain age. I could ask them for food or a bed at any time of the day or night without any questions asked. Thirdly, there were the post boxes, people such as cafe owners or garage mechanics with whom I could leave messages or arrange for meetings without this appearing suspicious. Of course, we could not use the telephone because of the listening tables, or write letters because the letters were often opened. The roads were closely watched, and I avoided the gendarmes as much as I could. This was one of the reasons that made me choose the bicycle as a means of transport. I could cycle along roads that were little used. It was always important to avoid being noticed and carefully follow the slightest rules, such as having a rear light on one's bike. If your rear light was not working, even in broad daylight, you risked having to pay an immediate fine, or what was more serious, being taken to the station. That would have been a disaster, because they would have checked the numbers on my identity card and would have seen that it was a fake. It would have been really stupid to get picked up for such a minor detail. There would have been a whole series of inquiries as a result, and all that could have led to being taken before a firing squad. I was always made extremely welcome wherever I went. The French looked on me as a kind of messiah, a quartermaster sergeant of the armies of freedom. And when I paid one of them a visit, I had to fight so they would not make a huge feast of it. This is from Felix. Note the reply. Message number 1 received. Very happy that everything is going well. Stop. Let me know urgently of a place for a parachute drop of material for the next moon. If the landing area is accepted, we will send a message to the London radio, for example, any old message. The priest drinks brandy or something like that. Then we will take turns at the radio to be sure not to miss any of the BBC broadcasts of personal messages. And the evening when we hear ours, we will go to the landing area with lamps. I will show you how to place yourself with the lamps. Then the plane arrives and drops the parachutes. I had to find a landing place for my first drop. During my innumerable bicycle rides, I had already noticed 2 or 3 fields that looked promising, and I noted down their details on a Michelin map. These maps were sold freely, and you could have one in your possession without it appearing odd. The owner of the field had to agree. Otherwise, he could have noticed our nightly comings and goings, talk about it to his neighbours, and as in the song, the whole area would have known about it. I therefore climbed on my old bike once more, and set off to find a place, being careful to avoid the main roads. First of all, I went to see a farmer who had large orchards. He was a man who was full of goodwill, but a bit exuberant, and his gift of the gab was too extreme. If I organized the reception with him, I was afraid that he would take me at my word literally, and invite all his friends and acquaintances in for several drinks to celebrate the happy event. The area was good, well out of the way, without trees or pylons where the parachutes might get snagged, but I thought I might find another where the owner was more discreet. I therefore spoke to a young peasant who was serious and withdrawn, but his lands were too close to the main road. Then I remembered Old Man Pomeran. He was an old chap who was very popular in the region. Everybody liked him, except the Germans and the sympathizers of the Vichy regime. He had served in the Moroccan campaign in 1905, and he liked to talk about his memories of the colonies, and in particular the epic fights he had with hungry lions. I decided on his field. It was a bit narrow, but long enough, and the longest part was oriented towards a north-south axis, that is, in the direction of the prevailing winds. When I got back, I looked up the field on the map and made a note of the exact reference. I wrote a message alluding to the lions of Old Man Pomeran, and then I just had to wait for the BBC to broadcast my message to let me know that the operation would take place the following night.
Here's Felix 1, John.
7 containers should be enough.
Yes, no more. It's his first operation.
Any special stores apart from Eureka and S-Phone?
He has a large number of targets, so give him plenty of HE and make it a 1-star priority.
In the pinpointing section, we selected a Michelin map of the same number Felix was working with in France. And then it was only a matter of a few minutes to find the point, transfer it to a large-scale map of the area, and work out the degrees of longitude and latitude. The result was very carefully vetted in consultation with the Air Ministry. There must be no doubt whatsoever as to the position of the field on the map. Was there any flak in the area? Any enemy fighter airfields in the vicinity? Would reception lights be screened by trees? If the point passed these and other tests, the ground could be accepted. An aircraft couldn't be risked on an uncertain mission.
Harry, will the containers and packages for Felix 1 be ready tomorrow night?
Felix 1? Yes, it's all tied up.
Everything depended on the country to which the stores were going. We never knew the exact destination, but usually we had an idea, for instructions were put in the containers. These were printed in French or Norwegian, Dutch, Flemish, even German. We packed Brens, Stens, plastic explosive, grenades, fuses, tire bursters, incendiaries, clams and limpets. These are boxes of explosive fitted with magnets which would stick to machines or sides of ships. Corned beef, tobacco, cigarettes and chocolate. Wireless sets, as you can imagine, wanted very careful packing, though they were specially made to survive rough handling. We tried to keep up with the growing demand for containers and have a stock of standard packings in hand, but we found it very difficult. truckloads were rolling out to the airfields day and night.
Il y a la question du temps, vous savez.
Oui, mais enfin, c'est très joli. Voilà 8 jours qu'on attend. Et rien n'arrive, rien ne se passe. Le temps est magnifique ici.
Ici, oui, mais en Angleterre. Là-bas, c'est le pays des brumes, vous savez.
Operations room? No, sir, nothing so far. Yes, we'll let you know as soon as we hear ourselves, sir. I wish to heaven the weather boys would make up their minds.
So you should be all right in these areas here, sir.
Norway and Denmark definitely out.
Yes, sir. Cloud on the hills.
We'll do all priority operations tonight in Holland, Belgium, central and southern France.
London, please.
Operations room? Oh, good. Just a minute. Opposite tonight's through. Brenda. Liner 77. Ketch 16. Beef beer. Felix 1. Pluto 2. Pluto 5.
Ici, Londres. Voici notre 8e bulletin d'information au cours duquel vous entendrez quelques messages personnels.
Message très important pour le chef de Gaël. Attention, il va pleuvoir bougrement ce soir. Hamilcar conduit une Ford. Les lions sont terribles.
I wanted my first reception to be a success, mainly to get the confidence of the Frenchmen I'd recruited. There was many a slip that might ruin things yet. Clouds were sweeping over the moon, and the navigator had needed all the moonlight possible to pick his way to our field. Our torches weren't up to much either, just ordinary little pocket lamps with 4-volt batteries. I placed a few guards around the field, and I managed to get an old truck to take away the containers. We brought some bread and cheese and some wine, and a moonlight picnic helped to pass the time. Some of them were pretty skeptical about the aircraft ever coming at all. Then suddenly, this was the most dangerous moment of the whole reception. The Germans must have heard the aircraft passing over, and of course they knew that the RAF were dropping agents and supplies all over France. A lone plane usually meant parachuting. I didn't want to be caught with 7 containers strewn over the field, and we had to remove all signs of the reception before dawn. Couldn't even bring the truck onto the field because of wheel tracks, and 4 containers was our maximum load. This little runabout was the only form of transport we could get. It was made in 1912 and was still going strong, and noisily. We were soon on our way, and traveling by side roads with a few guards giving some protection, we arrived at a farm belonging to one of the reception committee. He'd built a false wall in his barn to hide his best wine from the Germans. But we could only fit 3 containers in here. He was furious and promised that next time he'd build a real arms depot for us.
The next few days were taken up in dispersing the stuff we'd received. Do you remember how after the blitzes, food stocks were removed from the ports and dispersed all over Britain? It was just the same with us. We couldn't put all our stores in one hiding place. Anyhow, especially after this first reception, I had to distribute widely, if thinly, to all my people. They all considered themselves of priority importance. Sometimes I doled out the stuff to men who'd been at the reception committee, and sometimes I delivered it myself. As few people as possible knew the whereabouts of our hiding places. I had to take a Bren gun to a place about 30 miles away, and I got a forester to take me with a load of wood hiding it. We had a rather rickety old truck, a gasogen burning charcoal and wood chips instead of petrol. It took hours to get going in the morning and was thoroughly unreliable. But I couldn't refuse any form of transport on four wheels. A nasty moment came when we sighted a control at a crossroads. For my next operation, I used another field with a new reception committee. I tried the Eureka this time, and it worked very well. The aircraft, fitted with special apparatus, picked up our radar waves 10 minutes before we heard the engines. The navigator had to watch a green line that moved horizontally across a dial. This line showed him at once when he wandered off course. All he had to do was to keep it in the middle. It was a grand feeling seeing the stores dropping to us. It meant we could soon begin our sabotage activity. We knew the Germans had wireless direction finding stations in France. Once they realized an operator was working within a certain area, they sent out small listening vans. This meant the operator had to be continually on the move. Cat hadn't been working in the same room for very long, so perhaps we were a little too confident.
Herr Barr?
Senden Sie mir sofort 2 Männer zu dem Haus im Place Carnot. Sie übermitteln sofort.
Sofort, Herr Barr.
Danke.
Vos papiers, madame.
Comment?
Vos papiers, madame.
Oui, certainement.
Luckily, I'd made an arrangement with the girl who lived in the house opposite to keep a sharp lookout when my curtains were drawn. That meant I was transmitting or receiving. So when I'd heard a loud thumping on her piano, the danger signal, I was all prepared to receive those unwelcome visitors. In spite of this narrow escape, I thought it best to finish off the interrupted message. But from now on, I certainly start working from another house.
I had to train new reception committees, and as time went on, I was able to leave the organization of receptions to local groups. Every moon period, we'd listen to the messages during the BBC News. Sometimes we'd hear our message and go out to the field and the plane didn't turn up. The pilot might have lost his way or been shot down. To be able to map read, he had to fly about 1,000 feet, so he was vulnerable to light flak as well as the heavy stuff. They were always furious at being kept out all night for nothing. But if I could tell them a day or two after that the aircraft that should have come to us had been shot down, that stopped their grumbling.
By now I was transmitting from 3 separate houses, using them alternately. The Gestapo kept records of all our messages, but these weren't of any use to them without our codes. Every operator had a separate code. That's one of the reasons they were so eager to get hold of us. Once they got one of us, they stopped at nothing in order to extract the code. If they succeeded, they'd be able to read all previous messages, and they'd start contacting London, trying to give the impression that the operator was still free. They might organize Gestapo reception committees and get the RAF to drop supplies, or even agents, right into their hands. Felix was planning an attack on a railway yard, and we were anxiously awaiting approval from London.
At last, full approval arrived. I handed over the time fuses to the foreman of the engine sheds.
Oui. Merci.
C'est quoi en faire, n'est-ce pas?
Tout à fait. Au revoir, monsieur. Au plaisir. Au revoir, monsieur. Au revoir.
I am the foreman in charge of the chantier. All we railway workers realized what our engines meant to the Germans. On many occasions, we tried to sabotage them. But it was not until Felix arrived that we discovered the best way. A small charge in the cylinders. The Germans never left us unguarded, but one can always smuggle things when you want to. I decided it would be best to put the charges in place just before we finished work for the day. The fuse will give us time to get out of the yard before the charges went off. So under the very noses of the Germans, we placed the charges in more than 30 engines. Then we left, just as usual. We waited in cafes and at our homes. We didn't have to wait a long time. Soon as we heard,
Bonjour, monsieur.
Bonjour. Monsieur Félix?
Oui. Entrez.
Merci.
Qu'est-ce que vous voulez?
Je voudrais voir Mademoiselle Nadine.
Vous voulez dire Mademoiselle Nadine Perron?
Non, c'est Mademoiselle Nadine Ducrot, votre cousine que je cherche.
Where have you sprung from?
London told me to contact you.
Have a drink.
Thank you. You haven't got any whiskey, have you?
You're an optimist.
Whatever you have got, then. It's even getting pretty scarce back home now, so they tell me. Though I used to know a pub in Tottenham Court Road, where they had a very good supply. Suppose that's been blitzed by now.
Here's the pub in Tottenham Court Road.
All the best.
Well, what can I do for you?
Can you get a man out of France for me?
Through Spain or Switzerland?
I'm afraid that's no good. He's been wounded in the leg. Lysander pickup is the only way.
Why do you come to me?
Evidently you've got the latest dough.
It's not too easy. There aren't many fields around here big enough for an aircraft to land in.
But will you try?
I'll do my best.
I had a feel for the pickup in mind and went along to have a look at it. I didn't feel too happy about receiving an aircraft. A couple of SS battalions had just moved into the local barracks, and they were making reconnaissance sorties at night. I don't suppose they were after us, but we might have had some awkward questions to answer if they found us gathered round a Lysander in the middle of the night. The field was ideal, surrounded by low-lying woods, perfect surface, and well concealed from the road. But the RAF would need exact measurements, so I started walking down one side, counting my paces.
Ted, have you seen this telegram? Felix wants a Lysander pickup.
I was expecting this. I'll send him out a lieutenant on the same operation. He shows growing and he must have help.
He sent a promising ground, and the Air Ministry are photographing it tomorrow.
Oh, good.
I was able to use the pilot as a postman. I sent London details of a local factory where parts of a new secret weapon were being stored. I asked them to stop the RAF from coming and bombing it. I wanted to have a crack at setting fire to it myself. Both Gustav and Leon were good types. It was always a risk when people came out from London. You never knew what you might get. But I'd met them both during training and felt sure we'd work well together. They were so obviously pleased to find themselves in the field. Gustav's French wasn't too hot, but it would deceive the Germans. Leon had a perfect accent. He'd lived for years in Paris and had passed as a native with anyone.
Saint-Jean, n'est-ce pas? Voilà la salle des gardes. Vous passez, il y a une patrouille par là. Vous passez par la barricade et vous aurez à peu près 4 heures pour faire le travail. Bon, on va détruire ça.
It had been a good blaze, but as usual, the Germans were quick on the uptake and called in the SS battalions. They managed to control the fire before it spread to the other buildings.
Pity they put out that blasted fire. Cigarette?
Thanks.
There's nothing like enough damage. We'll have to get the RAF to bomb it.